Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. This is Sunday Politics on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbaloye in Lagos. The nation should perhaps brace up for a policy direction from President Muhammadu Buhari tomorrow in the fight against COVID-19. This is because the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has met with the President to give him an update on the journey so far regarding the control of the COVID-19 pandemic. The meeting comes as Lagos, Ogun, and Abuja enter into the second phase of the easing of the lockdown announced by the President. The task force had earlier indicated intention to discuss the level of compliance of Nigerians to the guidelines laid down before the easing of the lockdown and efforts made to contain the spread of COVID-19. The President had on the 4th of May relaxed the lockdown and replaced it with a ban on interstate travels and 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew across the country. The PTF had warned on the compliance level of Nigerians and that Nigerians should not take things for granted. The House of Representatives appears unshaken by the lawsuit aimed at stopping them from going ahead with the infectious disease bill. The lower chamber of the National Assembly had disputed the reports that a federal high court sitting in Abuja had ordered the suspension of the ongoing process of the consideration of the Control of Infectious Disease Bill 2020. The chairman of the House Committee on Media, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, faulted the claims in a statement saying the report is a misrepresentation of fact, which has also misled Nigerians on the position of the count on the controversial bill. According to the House spokesperson, the applicant had, by way of a motion ex parte, sought a court order suspending the consideration of the bill by the lawmakers. By the way, the man who went to court to stop the House of Representatives, Senator Dino Melaye, has also found a fault in the efforts in the upper chamber in a similar proposed legislation. The Senate had also started consideration of a bill to replace the Quarantine Act. Senator Otazi is the senator behind the Senate bill in that. And let's take a listen to Senator Otazi on that bill.
Well, you see, what I have is the law I have here. I haven't read what's in the House of Reps, but what I've just known is that we have a bill that is going to address the health issues connected with COVID and beyond, so that such issue, whenever it comes in the future, you have a law.
Does the bill make vaccination compulsory?
No, it doesn't make vaccination compulsory. There's nothing. Because we have yellow fever in this country here. It's not compulsory. If you want to travel any part of the country outside the world, if you are coming from an area that have such issue, all the airports in anywhere you are going, the port of destination will demand to know whether you are vaccinated for yellow fever. You know, if you are in any part of the world. So we have always had yellow fever vaccination here. If you want to travel, they demand for it. At the airport, you go with it. If you don't have it and you get to the airport, they will ask you to do it there. You know, before you go, so that you don't bring it. If they're having fear that where you are going, we reject it. They will enforce it here. So this is the issue we're having here. There's nothing new we are trying to bring up that doesn't exist.
That's Senator Otazi, the man who sponsored the bill, which a lot of people say is similar to what is happening on the House of Representatives. That bill on the House of Representatives, the Senator Dino Melaye, former lawmaker, has gone to court on that matter. But he's also picking holes in the very bill as spoken by Senator Otazi. Let's hear from Senator Dino Melaye on some of his reasons for opposing the proposed legislation. Thank you so much, Senator Dino Melaye, for coming, for joining us tonight on the program. Let's get your view. You raised some issues about the bill being proposed in the Senate, which a lot of people say they are similar. You have gone to court on that, the issue of the House of Representatives to stop the process. You think that Nigeria does not need a legislation on infectious disease at a time like this?
Good evening, and I'll say good evening to Nigerians. Basically, I will say that I'm not going to comment on the bill in the House of Representatives because the case is right now before the court of law, and it will be sub judice for me to speak on it. But I can speak on the bill in the Senate, because the bill in the Senate is a conjoined twin with the one in the House of Representatives. They all have the same characteristics, the same details, so to say. And I want to say that that bill is anti-people, that bill is anti-God, that bill is satanic, that bill will infringe on the fundamental right of Nigerians, and myself inclusive. And it is so laughable that the National Assembly did not take a detailed look at that bill, because Section 74 of the bill in the Senate is actually delegating the powers of amending laws and that act itself to the minister. I mean, that is like the National Assembly now, or the Senate in specific terms, relinquishing their powers to amend laws to a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And I think that is laughable. That bill will take away the fundamental rights of Nigerians. And people have been saying that you cannot actually stop a bill until it is passed. And I said it is not true. If for those who are lawyers, they will know that there is the case of A.G. Bendel versus Attorney General of the Federation in 1981, where the Supreme Court held that the issue of legislative processes starts with the first reading of a bill, and that despite the fact that the powers of the National Assembly to make laws is predicated upon the provisions of the Constitution, it must be in accordance with the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And that powers to make law must also not conflict with Section 46(1) of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which says that anywhere the fundamental rights of individuals is going to be breached or likely to be breached, not even when it is breached, that every Nigerian have the powers to approach the court of law. And that is exactly what we are doing. And I can tell you that
if I may comment quickly on what you raised, sorry, apologies, you raised the issue on fundamental human rights of Nigerians, and you raised the issue on the Section 74 of that bill. That bill is talking about the powers of the minister. It does not look like it talks about infringing on the rights of citizens. Is there any other areas you think that is against the rights of citizens in that in your objections?
I will tell you, like I just told you, that over 80% of the sections of that bill definitely contravene the provisions of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, including the fundamental right of Nigerians. But in quick response to that, I will tell you that fundamentally the provisions of the Senate bill, if you look at that bill, section, sorry, I'm just going to come to that now. If you look at section 8, section 9, section 10 of that bill, section 5 of that bill talks about national emergency bill. Section 6 also will infringe on fundamental rights of Nigerians. Section 8 of that bill, in respect to forceful release of health information of citizens, also is an infringement on your fundamental right, because your medical informations and health informations are your personal informations, and no law can force you to relinquish that. Section 11 of that bill also provides for destruction
Senator,
of food, animals.
Sorry, if I may butt in quickly, have you read the infectious disease bill in the United Kingdom, for example?
I want to tell you that there is nowhere in the world, even in the Western world, that everything is allowed, that they have a draconian, satanic bill like this. I've gone through the bill right now that is being operational in the US, in Canada, in Germany, in the UK. None of them have affronted the rights of citizens like this, like the one put together by the National Assembly of Nigeria. It is so funny that even the right of the National Assembly to make laws and to amend laws was relinquished in that same bill to an appointee of the president, the Minister of Health. And too much power was arrogated to the Director General of NCDC, who have power to arrest, who have powers to arrest without warrants, who have powers to shut down any building, He has powers of exemption to exempt anybody, no matter who is concerned. And then where is the powers of the courts to grant warrants? Where are the power of the court to enforce arrest? All these have been taken away and unilaterally given.
Senator Melaye, if I may quickly ask you this.
Where the Director General deemed fit.
Yeah, I know you have a lot of friends in the National Assembly. These are your colleagues. Some of them are, in fact, Senator Utazi is a member of your party, the man who raised that bill, who moved that motion. Have you been able to relate with them to say, I'm a former member of the National Assembly, and these are my objections on the motion or the bill that is being proposed? Have you been able to relate with them on that?
I want to state that this bill has nothing to do with political party. This bill has nothing to do with being a former member of the National Assembly or a present member of the National Assembly. It has to do with the fundamental rights of Nigerians. It has to do with the fundamental right as Nigeria is a signatory to United Nations Charter on African and People's Rights. Nigeria is a signatory to African Charter on Human and People's Rights. So, and if we know that the fundamental human right, according to Section 4 of our Constitution, is not debatable, and Section 1(3) of the Constitution have said any law that is in conflict with the Constitution to the extent of inconsistency shall be null and void, then why are we bringing laws that will confront the fundamental rights of individuals? Section 16,
at this
Section
point,
17
let me quickly
of that
also
bill.
ask you, apologies, you understand, Senator, on the issue of separation.
Forceful vaccination. And the truth of the matter,
All right. I wanted to ask you about the issue of...
How can you be talking about forceful vaccination in this period?
Is there, the senator said there was nothing like that. Senator Utazi said there's nothing like that in that bill.
There's nothing like what?
The forceful vaccination.
It is there, and it is written in black and white. Let Senator invite myself and Senator Utazi to a public debate, and we will dissect the bill. And I will tell you that Section 54(1)(b), Section 54(3)(b), Section 35(c), Section 3(1) of the bill, Section 28, 29, 43 of the bill, all are talking about forceful vaccination. And the brain behind this is Bill Gates. How can a man who is campaigning for depopulating the earth be the same person saying he wants to save the world through vaccine?
Senator Dinamala, you've just made a claim now that, can you substantiate the claim that you've just made? You just mentioned the name of a person that you are not able to validate or validate your claim as the relationship of the man and the bill you have raised now.
I can validate it by the exposures we have received, by the information we have received, that Bill and Melinda Gates are the ones campaigning year before now about depopulating the earth. And the same couple now talking about saving the world through vaccination. So I want you to look at the correlation. Does it add up?
If you say that, Senator Melaye, isn't that too dangerous to put the links? Now, when you're saying they are, if that's what you claim that they are campaigning, but if you say they are the ones campaigning or they are the ones backing this bill, isn't that way too far? Have you been able to substantiate that they are directly behind this bill?
I have not said, excuse me, please. I have not said they are the ones backing the bill. But I can tell you that they have an interest because NCDC is being sponsored by the same people who are the sponsors of NCDC through the foundation that belongs to them. And
all right, Senator, before I allow you go, those are very strong claims that you are making, and unfortunately, you may not be able to substantiate. But let me ask you this: you believe in the issue of separation of powers?
I have not made any categorical claim. But what I'm telling you that there is inference that, and I still stand upon what I told you, that the man who is campaigning for depopulating the earth, I want to know, I want to be schooled, I want to understand how that same person is the one who wants to save the world through a vaccine.
All right, Senator, if you like, if you could answer the question that I asked, so that we can conclude this conversation on this bill. You believe in the issue of separation of powers, isn't it?
Thank you.
Senator Melaye.
Sorry, I lost you there.
Yeah, I said you
Okay,
believe
you said,
in
do I
the
believe in-
separation of powers.
Of course, as a lawmaker and as a law student, I believe in the separation of powers.
So, and you hope that the process
As
of
stipulated
lawmaking,
in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
and you believe that the process of lawmaking can be impacted by an external influence, either by any other arm of government.
Section 4(8) of the Constitution is clear that the powers of the courts, in fact, they have jurisdiction over the laws that we make in the National Assembly. And that is why once there is a need for interpretation of those laws, you must go to the court to get exact interpretation for the law. The lawmakers cannot interpret the law they make. So what we have done is to go to those who have the constitutional powers to interpret the laws that the lawmaker make or in the process of making, and which is the court of law. And that's why we have gone there. So it is not interference with the powers of the legislature at all.
Senator Dino Melaye, I must
Moreover, like I
sincerely
told
thank
you,
you
Section
for your thoughts
46(1).
tonight and for coming on. Senator Dino Melaye, former lawmaker, thank you so much for coming
Thank you
on
very
tonight.
much.
I told you earlier that President Buhari has met with members of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. And yesterday, the president received a herbal formulation from Madagascar touted to be effective in the treatment of COVID-19. President Muhammadu Buhari will receive the item from Guinea-Bissau's president, Umaru Embalo, at the State House in Abuja. However, said that he will be guided by science before allowing any new medicines to be administered on Nigerians. Let's get some thoughts on Nigeria's effort in the fight against the COVID-19 and what should be expected in the coming days as the first phase of the easing of the lockdown is over. I'm now being joined on the program by Dr. Sani Aliyu, is the national coordinator of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. Thank you so much, Dr. Aliyu, for coming tonight. Let's begin the conversation around the first phase of the ease of the lockdown. We are entering into the second phase. What should we be expecting?
So, of course, Sheun, I cannot say categorically to you what you'll be expecting. We have to wait for Mr. President to let us know his decision. As you said, we have submitted a report. If you recall, 2 weeks ago, we started the process, gradual segmental reduction in terms of the lockdown. And the three main reasons why we went for that approach was, one, to enable the system, particularly the healthcare system, to cope with any additional insults as a result of the pandemic. In other words, to prepare ourselves and reduce flatten the curve, as we usually say, so that the health system can be able to take up any additional shocks. Secondly, we wanted to improve the level of public awareness of COVID-19 so that it becomes a voluntary change in behavior rather than an enforcement issue. And then thirdly, of course, we wanted to have an opportunity to open up our economy because having been closed for 5 weeks, this has had a significant adverse effect on our economy. And I must say, we have made substantial progress, even though we're still not very happy with the level of compliance. So for instance, when it comes to testing, we've been able to add at least another 12,000 tests over the last 2 weeks. We've increased the number of isolation beds available in the country from 3 to 5,000 beds. We've trained an additional 10,400 healthcare workers to enable us look after patients. And more importantly, we've demonstrated that the pandemic has actually slowed in terms of its doubling time from about 7 days to 11 days. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. I think from the point of view of community engagement, we definitely need to start pushing more and more and getting the states involved even more. Because at the end of the day, we really know that the success of this campaign, so to speak, really depends on the acceptance of the general public when it comes to changing their behavior, whether it's the use of hand washing sanitizers, the use of face masks, physical distancing measures, avoiding mass gatherings. These are all things that will substantially change the way we interact in society. And it's something that has to be inculcated within us over a long period of time. But hopefully we will get to know what the next stage is over the next 24 hours. From that point onwards, of course, we'll be very happy to engage the public and let them know.
Okay. So, Dr. Aliyu, stay with us, please. We'll take a break. And when we come back, coming up next on the program, efforts at getting Nigeria remedy for COVID-19 will come into our conversation. What have we gotten so far? The solution? A vaccine? A local remedy? We'll find out with Dr. Sani Aliyu, the National Coordinator of the PTF, after the break, everyone. Join us again. Welcome back, everyone. Don't forget to let us know what your views are on the issues that we are talking tonight on the program. Tweet to us on these handles, hashtag Sunday Politics, on the handles that you can see there on the screen. Send an email to us, politicstoday@channelstv.com. The first phase of the ease of the lockdown is over. We're entering into the second phase, and tonight we're speaking with the National Coordinator of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. Let's continue with the conversation with Dr. Sani Aliyu. Thank you, Dr. Aliyu, for your time tonight. Let me quickly ask you, do you think Nigerians have complied so far, with the guidelines that have been slated by the federal government?
So that's a good question. We actually did an NOI poll last week involving about 1,000 Nigerians. And what this showed was that virtually all Nigerians have heard of COVID at one point or the other. A lot of Nigerians have come across some of our adverts, whether it's TV or video or radio or radio jingles, etc., about 90 to 95%. But what was clear was the level of compliance when it comes to wearing masks, when it comes to physical distancing measures, left a lot to be desired. And to me, it just shows the importance of ensuring that we have adequate public awareness campaigns. These sort of measures, if you're trying to change behavior, especially if you are trying to change behavior and sustain it over a period of time, it has to be voluntary. People need to be aware of the risks in order to make sure that they have their masks with them when they go out, in order to make sure that they are not coming into close proximity with others. And this requires a huge amount of risk communication and social mobilization. And that's one of the things we will be really looking at over the next few weeks. Back to your question, yes, a substantial number of Nigerians have complied, but it's far from being satisfactory. And that's what concerns us really. For us to be comfortable with the current situation of things, we need to make sure that Nigerians continue to comply with those measures that we have set out. Of course, it's difficult when you live in a house with 10 or 12 persons. We know in Africa, for instance, within the urban population, 56% of the urban population live in slums, where it's overcrowded, etc. But nevertheless, we still have to, it's our responsibility as government to make sure that we communicate risks when it comes to infections, and we save lives as well for our fellow citizens. And just as important is the issue of trying to protect the very vulnerable, particularly our elderly population and those with comorbidities, because this is where the disease has quite significant morbidities and can cause death. And this particular population really needs to be communicated to effectively in terms of making sure that they continue to protect themselves and keep away from the general public. Because when COVID affects this population, if you're above the age of 65, 70, or you have diabetes or some underlying immunodeficiency, or you have hypertension, cardiovascular disease, you really don't want to get COVID infection because you could end up dying from it. The substantial majority of people, when they get COVID, will recover. Up to 80% will recover, and especially young people below the age of 50, 40 will probably have mild to moderate symptoms. But we have seen situations where younger people have also died from COVID. It's a really frightening scenario, We don't know how long this epidemic will last. You can see from some of the countries that started before Nigeria had its first case, they're still struggling. But more importantly, it's the effect that it's going to have on our health system, because the likelihood of death being much higher as a result of our health systems not being able to cope, people finding it difficult to access hospital care when they are sick, is likely to have. In other words, the side effect of having a COVID pandemic could potentially be even more severe than the COVID pandemic itself, in terms of its impact on the health system and the ability of our citizens to access good health care.
Dr. Aliyu, you warned in the early stage of after the ease of the lockdown, and these are your own words. You said, please respect and follow all the guidelines we have instituted. If we continue to see violations of these guidelines, we will be pushed to review and possibly change them, end of quote. With this, do you think you haven't gotten to that point just yet?
So, Sheung, as I said earlier on, we'll have to wait and see what the decision of Mr. President is tomorrow. And then your question could be valid or not. But at this point in time, I cannot say what the answer to that is. Yes, we have been reviewing, we've been monitoring quite closely. We do have concerns with certain aspects in terms of the implementation. But we've made our recommendations to Mr. President, and we'll have to wait for his decision tomorrow.
In your estimation and your guidelines that you have slated out, what is in the, because you slated how you want the first phase to go, the organization that could be opened, those that could operate at that first phase. In the second phase, which organizations or which sectors of the public can be allowed to open should the president give a go-ahead to go into the second phase?
So, well, at this point in time, Sheung, we don't even know whether we'll go into the second phase or we might revert. So, as I said, we already know the places that we have allowed to start operating, and we've reviewed the guidelines that we have, and we've made our recommendations. So, at this point in time, I think it's premature to say whether places of worship or schools will open, etc. Because who knows, maybe the places that are currently open may also close. So we have to wait until we get the decision of Mr. President, and then we'll go into further detail, just like we did with the last lockdown, where we provided additional information immediately after Mr. President's address. We will do the same thing as well with this coming phase. Nothing stops a phase 1 from being changed. Nothing stops us from progressing to a phase 2. But it all depends, as I said, on Mr. President's decision tomorrow.
Dr. Aliyu, the governor of Cross River State, Ben Ayade, he warned that any further extension of the lockdown of the country in response to the ravaging COVID-19 pandemic will spell doom for the country. Are you cautious, or are you thinking in line of what the governor has said? Because this is what he said. He said, in terms of statistics, 65% of the population is below the age of 35, and the virus itself does not have penetrative force in such a demography. He also says that our climatic conditions are different. So he's invariably saying that Nigeria should unlock or remove every form of lockdown. Do you subscribe to that position?
Thank you, Sheung. So it's the responsibility of the PTF as placed based on Mr. President's directives to review, to take a decision as far as the epidemic is concerned. A lot of us have been involved with COVID infection, whether it's at an external level or within the domestic sphere. And you must understand that the PTF, as you see it, is not just the PTF membership itself. There's a large group of people behind the PTF providing advice, looking at the scientific aspects, doing a lot of modeling, etc. And whatever decision we take will be in the best interest of the country. we do take into cognizance the economic impacts of locking down. We also take into cognizance the issues of mortality. Even one death alone is not acceptable when it comes to COVID infection, provided you can prevent it. There is absolutely no evidence that COVID infection behaves in a different way based on weather. There isn't. I'm not aware of it. There are countries that have very similar weather to Nigeria, and they've had significant mortality. And even within the African subcontinent, for instance, if you look at Algeria and you look at Egypt, how different is our weather to Algeria and Egypt? But they've had significant mortality from COVID infection. So whatever we do is a balance. What we're trying to do is saving lives and at the same time save livelihoods. So it's a balance. We have to look at all the different aspects, and then we will then make a recommendation to Mr. President. But I don't want to join words with any of the anybody within the leadership sphere, whether it's at state level or federal level. All I can say is we're doing our job to the best of our ability, and the advice we'll give will be in the best interest of the country.
Quickly, I'll show you the statistics, but before that, we've gotten the Madagascar herbal remedy that's been sent to Nigeria by our African brothers. And in that sense, have we been able to, how far have we come in discovering our own local remedy? Any news on that?
All tradition, whether it's modern drugs, modern medicine, or it's traditional herbal medications, etc. In this country, we do have laws, and those laws are very specific. In order for you to use a drug, it has to go through phases when it comes to validation. If it's a modern drug, it has to go through several clinical trials. You cannot make a claim and then suddenly start giving a drug to a patient. And that's the same approach we are applying to the Madagascar herbal concoction. As Mr. President said yesterday, whatever decision we take will be based on sound science. Remember that Nigeria is not in isolation. We are part of the global community. We have been feeding into some of the trials that are currently going on globally, including the WHO Solidarity trial. There are several drugs that are currently being considered. But those treatments have to be done in the context of a clinical trial. And I can tell you, based on previous experiences worldwide, nowadays you cannot just come and make a claim and then suddenly the drug will be administered to patients. We have a responsibility for making sure that whatever we give our citizens is safe, is effective, and does not have long-term adverse events.
So let me get it clear, Dr. Aliyu. We do not have a headway of for local remedy for any solution, either by vaccine or by any kind of treatment.
So at the moment, there are several clinical trials going on in terms of modern drugs. Possibly the most promising is a drug called Remdesivir, which was originally licensed for Ebola. Some of the initial reports are promising, but it's still early days yet. There's no vaccine at the moment available. It will probably take until possibly towards the end of 2021 before we can have a vaccine. I'm not aware of any herbal cure at the moment that has been validated and proven to work. So that's why whenever we talk about prevention, as they say, prevention is better than cure. You're better off not getting COVID infection. And in order not to get COVID infection, there are a number of things that you can do to protect yourself, to protect your family, to protect your loved ones, and particularly to protect those that are most vulnerable to the infection and most likely to die.
All right.
So my message to the general public is there is no drug at the moment that has been validated and proven to work. As you can see, even in Madagascar, they had their first mortality, I think today. Here in Nigeria, our case fatality rate is about 3%, but there are countries elsewhere in Africa that have case fatality rates of up to 10%, 1 in 10 dying. It's true that Our demography is very different. In Africa, for instance, 60% of the population or so are below the age of 25. So we have a youth bulge. And that youth bulge gives us a degree of protection when it comes to the severity of the illness. But nevertheless, COVID can still make you very sick, and regardless of your age, it can still kill you. So let's protect ourselves. I know it's not easy changing behavior. We all want to socialize. Humans are social animals. We want to meet our friends, we want to party, etc. But at this point in time, we're really better off keeping to ourselves and making sure that we protect each other and we protect the general public from further spread of this infection.
All right, quickly, Dr. Ali, let me show you. This is a breakdown of how things have gone over the since the ease of the lockdown. This is the first week of the ease of the lockdown after the president made that pronouncement. And you can see the progression in terms of the cases and also how far we've come and the deaths and the dates. And so the first week, then also you will find the second week, how we've come and in the death situation. So it brings me to the question, Dr. Ali, if you're looking at these statistics, we have not gotten to that point yet, is it? The last time you were on the program, I asked you if we have gotten to the peak for us to start descending. Have we gotten to that point yet?
Looking at the numbers, so several things come to mind. So in the first place, remember that we are testing a lot more than we used to. In the past, our positivity rate has been about 14 to 15%. So out of every 100, we get 14 to 15 positives. So the more you test, the more you will find. Secondly, there's no doubt that in terms of the stage of the epidemic, it's unlikely we've reached the peak. It's very likely that we will continue to have cases over the following week or two, or even longer. Remember, the incubation period for the illness itself is up to 2 weeks. So it's now that we're going to start seeing the impact of any relaxation of the measures. But having said that, no country on earth can afford a lockdown for a very long period of time. The effect on the economy, it will be substantial. You can see what's happened in the United States, in the UK and other developed countries where people have lost their employment, and these are countries that have very good social care systems. So talk less of a developing country setup. So that's why we have to have a balance. And 2 weeks ago when we made this assessment, what was very clear from our modeling was that if you institute a bunch of measures, a bundle of measures related to protection, such as washing hands, such as sanitization, hand sanitization, face mask, keeping your distance, physical distancing, avoiding mass gatherings, etc. If you do those as wearing face mask, if you do those as a bundle consistently and all the time, what you're doing is the equivalent of a lockdown. Because what is a lockdown? A lockdown is physical distancing at the population level.
All right.
The issue
Dr. Aliyu
is the alternative, which, yes,
yeah,
the alternative which we have put in place has not been complied with 100% by the public.
So we're going to go into our next break. We need to bring in the Minister of Education because that is another area that is being impacted. Just in about 60 seconds before we go on that break, some of those who tested positive and been treated and came out, some of them are talked about their treatment and the kind of medication they were given. They likened it to the kind of treatment for malaria. Can you clarify things? Is Nigeria using a malaria procedure for the treatment of COVID-19?
So as I've said in the past, malaria and COVID and coronaviruses are completely different things. One is a parasite, the other one is a virus. At the beginning of the epidemic, there have been some studies which are in vitro. In vitro means they are test tube studies that showed that the anti-malarial chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine kills the virus. So it's toxic to the virus, which is why it is being used as part of a combination. It's part of the clinical trials that are currently going on. But really, if you look at the prevalence, if you look at the response to COVID infection, 80% of
All right.
those that have COVID infection will have mild to moderate illness, and they will get better. Even within the Wuhan population of those that were positive in China, 91% to 92% fully recovered. So even if you are taking kola nut, Sheun, the likelihood is you will probably recover from COVID infection. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was the kola nut that got
All
you
right.
better.
Yeah. Dr. Sonny Aliyu, the National Coordinator of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you for having me.
We switch gears, we'll take a break, and when we come back, we look at the education sector. As the schools are shut, what is Nigeria doing in ensuring that these children who are at home are not losing out? The Minister of State for Education joins us next on the program. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back. Now, everyone, the Nigerian education sector perhaps is one of the most impacted sectors by the COVID-19. Children are now at home. The issues of our emergency system is under threat, and the hopes of the children are in the balance. How can Nigeria ensure that the children don't suffer setback in this period? Let's speak with the Minister of State for Education, Mr. Emeka Nwajuba, joins us from Abuja studio. Thank you, Honorable Minister, for joining us tonight on the program. A lot of parents are glued to the television set right now, hoping to hear some of the policy directions that you might want to give tonight. Let me begin by asking, is there any date set for resumption of schools yet?
Thank you, Sheun, and thank you, fellow Nigerians. Good evening. There isn't any known, can I say, a given date now for resumption of schools. What you have is a situation where all of us are waiting for how the COVID situation pans out. What we are certain, and what everybody knows, that we do not intend in any way to put our children at risk in any way or form. And it is important that all of us agree that in doing this, or how we bring children back to school, will be in their best interest and in the best interest of the nation. We, at the Ministry of Education, had before now worked on a couple of programs as to how education can be enhanced around the country. Before I joined the ministry in August, Malam Adamu, the Minister of Education, and the beautiful team we have there, had done a lot of work with planning for online studies for every child. This was an attempt to expand the ability of Nigeria to educate its citizens all around the country, with the limitations of class size, the limitation of infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So these were already been developed. They've gone even ahead of most countries by trying to move almost all of our curricula into a digital content. And the point where we have them now, when we were then met with this COVID situation, we were more or less a bit prepared. The preparation is in terms of a proper content policy. Again, Malam Adamu and the Ministry of Education at the last National Education Summit in Port Harcourt had already gone ahead to get the buy-in of almost all the states as to what the content development and what curricula should be able to be disseminated to all children. That had already been done, and we approved that just late last year. In the process of getting or cascading it out to all the states, we were met with COVID. So we were forced to accelerate some of the plans, which will then ask the UBEC, one of the agencies under the ministry, led by Alhaji Hamidu Boboyi, to then get in touch with all the state suburbs, marshal them under the ministry ICT plan, which is held in the Ministry of Education website, and then use that channel to have all our content sent to the states. The states, through their suburb, who already received funding from the UBEC, will then continue the further dissemination. And I've gone to several programs to say, yes, Lagos State, Anambra State, all the 36 states are now online or doing some form of broadcasting. Some are using local TVs. Some are using local radios. Some can get online. Most of the people who live in urban centers already are able to log on to this and are using this to teach their children. Some of the private schools already can go to Google School, go to all the, there are so many online materials that are available. We are trying to make sure that everybody is doing some form of learning. We are aware of the constraints, which, like I said, Malam Adamu and the rest of the team had been working on before. The constraints include people not being able to have the devices with which to even access this, even when we have them online or not. Nigeria is a huge country with nearly 20-something million people in schools, all kinds of forms of school, from the primary school through to tertiary institutions. We have a lot of people. However, the number of devices that are available, we're not at the point where we would like to be as a nation. And this is not just because we do not want to have them, but we don't have tablets being they're not produced in Nigeria. Laptops are not produced in Nigeria. There are hardly any devices that are produced in Nigeria. Everything is imported. And there's a limit to how much a country can really bring in. We have all kinds of assistance from the World Bank, from different organizations around the world. People have been trying to help
Honorable Minister,
over many years.
Yeah.
But
sorry if I may butt in. Yes. With all of these challenges, some of these situations that Channels Television has also brought to bear in some of our specials, but let me ask you, is there a possibility of a shift in the date of some of the major examinations like the Junior WAEC or the Senior WAEC or JAM or any other examinations that are major? Because obviously, some of these students may not be able to catch up.
Yes, of course, we have already done that. The first to announce was WAEC, followed by NECO and by NAPTEB. Just before I came into the studio from listening to what we are doing at the PTF, because we are working closely with PTF to keep updating us on what the sciences, the information available is. We are now hearing from all the research available to us that children who had been assumed not to be really affected by this could actually be affected in different forms that we didn't appreciate before and as we are learning. So we had shifted all the exam dates, all indefinitely, and we're working at how do we then get people examined. I tried to explain at the National Assembly the day before, a couple of weeks back, when they brought us into exam ASCOS. I explained to my colleagues at the National Assembly that really we are as worried as any other Nigerian. The president is a pro-poor, pro-children president. He's more eager to get work done for the children than even most people are. And that's the softest part of him, really. And he's always asking what needs to be done to help our children. And because this is the foundation of our entire manpower. So we are working on a different scenario to be able to test children so that they can progress to new classes. For WAEC, we have to do this in collaboration with the rest of West Africa because it is a West African examination body. NECO, which is national, is still within our purview, but we have to work out what it is that we need to examine and what kind of time frame we're looking at. More important for us is not just to examine the children, it's to know that the syllable we had established for them, they have some way of communicating to us that they have been tested.
So, Honorable Minister,
and they know what it is.
Yeah, so there are two major issues that I'd like you to touch on within the next few seconds that we have. One is the fact that some experts are saying this thing is a global pandemic. Maybe are you considering, because of the impact on Nigeria and how far some of these children are behind, of scrapping this academic year or the 2 terms that are involved? Because obviously a lot of them will miss out. Are you thinking of that?
We are thinking of a lot of things. You know that right now, first thing, what you can't do is that children can't wait. The child keeps growing. You can't, because some people need to, if you stop one intake this year, you're certifying the growth of a whole new set. So we're going to try to figure out how to test those who need to move to a different class. Because what we do essentially is to try to extract from a child his or her knowledge of prisms, of chemistry, of his, how do you titrate, how do you, what molecular values to attach to, what are the mathematical coefficients, in every test we do, what we're trying to extract from a child is his or her ability to recognize what it is that he needs to go to the next level. So we're working on modules to do that in the absence of conventional.
Senator,
but if we can
apologies, Honorable Minister.
As soon as we can, we'll return to reconciliation.
Yeah, so just in a few seconds, touch on the issue of these IPPIS and the university lecturers. A lot of them are regretting saying that there is disparity in the salary. Just in a few seconds, what are you doing? Are you listening to the lecturers and ASU on these issues?
Myself and ASU, we all are employees of the federal government. The same way I receive my emoluments via IPPS is the same way every other Nigerian receives that. If any other person wants to use a different format for his own employment, I'm not so sure why. But when I first joined the cabinet, I noticed that there were disparities in some of my, whatever the deductions were. And I went back to IPPS and said, look, I don't understand it, and they addressed it. And I expect that anybody else, there are so many people who had complaints from the time, IPPS is a platform that the military has joined, the IPPS police has joined, every other person who is being paid by the federal government. I would gladly want the universities to be independent and they pay themselves and the council can raise their money and pay themselves. But the federal government, who pays all of us, say they want to pay us by knowing who we are.
We're out of time, Honorable Minister.
And if you have any problem with some of the disparities, you go back to the same federal government. I don't pay them. The Ministry of Education don't pay them. Malam Adamu Adumo has been on this matter with the NUC executive.
All right. Honorable Minister, we have to leave it at that.
People who work there to try to make this work with them.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister for State for Education, Mr. Emeka Nwajuba. Thank you so much for your time tonight. And that's where we leave it, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sean Kimale. Bye-bye.